This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. Today I'm going to be continuing the theme of looking at commitment, a measure of mental toughness, and bringing in some past episodes of the podcast and some client stories to emphasize my points. So again, today is a solo episode. And firstly, a point I want to get across is that most of my clients are what you would class as goal-orientated. Goal orientation, it's a sub-measure of commitment. And these people, they enjoy setting goals, having goals to work towards. They're able to see themselves achieving, succeeding. They're able to visualize success easily. And when they do succeed, they're straight on to the next goal often, and then the next goal. Another trait some of my clients have, though I would argue not a huge amount, they're high in achievement orientation. Often, a lot of my clients, I would say, are actually probably more and moderately high in achievement orientation, which again is another sub-measure of commitment. So what do I mean by this? The person who is very high in achievement orientation, they're going to work harder than most to achieve their goals. They're going to be tenacious and they won't be easily distracted. Now, what tends to differentiate this person who's high and the guy who's moderate in achievement orientation is how they view setbacks and pressure. So the person who's high in achievement orientation, they're likely to prioritize and plan well against these setbacks. And I think what I notice certainly from the people who are moderate and the ones that are easily distracted, or more easily distracted, is that their planning and prioritization isn't the greatest. So on this note, I'm going to go on and I'm going to share an excerpt to one of my earlier podcasts with European Tour golfer Chris Paisley.
Big thing I wish I'd been kind of told when I was younger is read The Obstacle is the Way. That was a massive game changer for me. I think just a great book about kind of seeing obstacles for what they are and just being able to handle adversity, because at the end of the day, if you're going to be a success in anything, you're going to come up against a lot of adversity. And, you know, I've had my fair share of it in golfing terms, obviously not in terms of life, but it just really changed my whole mindset to golf. I learned how to deal with kind of things that weren't going quite right. Like I had a year where I was really struggling off the tee, and I got to the point where I almost thought, I'm just a bad driver of the ball. You know, I can't, like, it's just my thing. I don't drive it well. But I read this book and kind of realized that, yeah, my driving's not great at the moment, but that's an obstacle and you've got to deal with it and you got to learn to improve in your driving. It just totally flipped my mindset on how to approach it. And I just, that was my issue, my obstacle at the time. And rather than like curse it and kind of get depressed about it, I did something about it, and my driving has improved. And I think if you can have that attitude with everything in life, it's a huge thing. And The Obstacle's the Way by Ryan Holiday was just a massive kind of a learning point and a turning point in my kind of career, I think.
So what I took from Chris's comments there highlight that he is a guy who isn't easily distracted and he has a process to deal with difficulties. So you may be wondering why you would have a process to deal with difficulties or challenges. And what do I mean by a process? Well, if you bring emotional control, another sub-measure of mental toughness, into the equation, a person with a strategy, with a process that they follow ahead of things going wrong or getting tough, or when they are in the midst of things getting tough, they're not likely to lose too much control of their emotions. They're better able to maintain a clearer perspective on things. So 2 things that you can do. You can read books on dealing with adversity, as Chris did when he talks about The Obstacle is the Way, which incidentally I have read, and it is a fantastic book. And what you can also do is make sure that you've got people in your circle, or reach out to people that you trust, that you're able to speak to, that you're able to offload to, that you're able to have a moan and a whinge and things like that. Lots of people I've noticed over the last 2 years have found this especially difficult. In this period, we've been dealing with COVID. It's taken over like a huge part of our lives and the way that we go about things. So it's meant that a lot of people aren't as connected as what they were pre-COVID. And be that children, be that adults, a lot of people have suffered in that respect. So they haven't been able to just have their normal outlets to allow their emotions to come out, if you like. There's been a bottleneck, if you like. And to emphasize the point now around emotions and how important it is to be able to have a handle on them, I'm going to read an excerpt from Hank Haney's book. So Hank Haney was a golf coach for Tiger Woods for a number of years. And his book, The Big Miss, is where he talks about Tiger Woods an awful lot. So Hank says, I think one of Tiger's gifts was the ability, when he needed to turn off emotion. It was why, after a tantrum, he could still be serene over the next shot. No doubt he'd learned early on that strong emotions, unchecked adversely, affect coordination and focus and generally impede winning. His knack for shutting down emotion was a big reason why he closed out victories better than anyone else in history, and why he was so incredibly good at making the last putt. It was also why he could win half a dozen tournaments in a row and seem just as focused and collected coming up the 72nd hole in all of them. Meanwhile, it was normal for other players, even regular winners, to admit that a victory mentally exhausted them and would lead to a flat performance the next week. This was especially true with the majors. Mark O'Meara was an extremely hard worker and very driven, but when he won his only 2 majors in 1998 at the age of 41, he attained a deep satisfaction and could never quite summon the kind of will that had gotten him there. And that's closer to a human reaction. Tiger, who once won 4 major championships in a row, was beyond abnormal in this way. So yeah, clearly Tiger at his best was not able to get too high when he was winning or too low if things weren't quite going according to plan, which in those days when with this book was hardly ever the case. Tiger was very quick to move on to try and win the next major. He was almost machine-like in the way that he operated. Now, an issue that I see a lot is that people just don't want to think about challenges that they're likely to face. And this can be out of superstition in some cases. It can also be born out of fear of things going wrong if they focus too much on the challenges, on the difficulties that are going to happen. And I have noticed this in my work where maybe I've agreed a program of 6 sessions or 8 sessions with a client, and then partway through, they've had an upturn in form, partly down to our work. They're really enjoying themselves, having a good time there in their sport. So they decide not to continue with the last 2 or 3 sessions. And often this comes out of the fact that they're in a good place now. But what they're actually missing out on in those 2 or 3 sessions that they potentially don't then follow up with are coping strategies to deal with such difficulties or obstacles. Because let's be honest, they're going to happen somewhere along the line. Certainly working with a sports psychologist isn't going to prevent difficulties actually arising. Our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings all go up and down ever so slightly, or in some cases an awful lot. And then there are so many factors outside of our control in sport. Might be the opposition that we come up against for a period of time might be really difficult. Coaches may change things up mid-season with selection, bring in new players. Then you've got the weather, environmental demands may differ. Staff may leave, so the culture changes. Your teammates, they might go through a difficult time. Or personally, your circumstances at home may change. So as a sports psychologist, I'm looking to try and arm my athletes, my clients with different tools to deal with such challenges so that they don't go too far off track and they're able to cope with such pressures and adversity better. And in terms of adversity, this guest, former Paralympian and 2 times world record holder in the Para Triathlon Steve Judge as well, qualified to help you. In this short clip, he goes on to share some ideas and some tools that you can use in order to manage difficulties and adversity.
Setting goals and working towards them. So a lot of people ask me, how do you do that? So there's 3 principles I would say if you want to achieve. And that's what my why is to help people kind of experience the happiness and fulfillment of achieving their true life goals. So how do you achieve your true life goals? And that's different for everybody. It might be sport, it might be love, it might be educational, it might be money orientated. So how do you find out what that is? The first thing you've got to do is visualization. Get a vision. What is it that you want? Find out what your why is. What is it that you really, what makes you happy? What is your goal? What is your opportunity? What is your love? What is your desire, your dream? As I would call it, this is how you find your gold. You've got to find out what your vision is. So find out what that is. That's the first thing you've got to do. Second thing, once you found out what that is, benchmark it. You've got to benchmark it as soon as possible. I mentioned about that with me, getting my legs straight. If you want to lose weight, weigh yourself today, and then you can start losing weight. If you want to get faster, how fast are you now? If you want to earn more money, what's your bank account reading now, today? Benchmark it, then you can start recording your progress. Now, the third thing that you've got to do after you've done the vision and the benchmarking is take action. Of course, got to take action. You can't be all talk. You've got to start doing something. And all of these expand out, of course, to do. But you've got to start thinking about what you can do rather than what you can't do. What are you going to do to increase that benchmark, to get that benchmark moving? What action are you going to take today? And sometimes action can be doing research. Absolutely. Sit down in front of the computer and start doing some research. That is taking action. But eventually you're going to have to do something a bit more physical than that, I'm thinking. So make a plan for that. But when I talk about the plan, that's going off on another one. The three ones are vision, benchmarking, and action.
So Steve mentioned there about having a plan at the end. Well, this is my job now to help you with your plan and your process. He also touched on vision, benchmarking, and action. All great ideas. So yeah, I'm going to throw into the mix here about a helpful way for you to consider your process when dealing with difficulties. So how you might want to start this is by making a note of the challenges that you're likely to face on your way to achieving your goals. Many people don't do this out of fear or superstition, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I really encourage you to do so. It can really help you in the future when you do come across these difficulties and challenges that everybody faces. So once you've written them down, what you could then do is go on to visualize yourself responding positively to these challenges, noticing what you'll say to yourself, your body language, your breathing in the face of difficulties, how you're going to express yourself and your skills. So I'm going to use an example of a former client, a professional footballer who had issues with his coach, specifically around selection. And he stewed on this and stewed on it, and he didn't express his concerns. It went on to damage his relationships with the coach and some teammates, his motivation and confidence levels. So what we ended up doing was visualizing himself with his gaffer, seeing himself coming up against different obstacles, having tough conversations, seeing himself approaching the coach for a conversation in the manner that he wanted to, noticing what he'd say, how he'd say it, noticing coach's reactions and responses, and then his subsequent reactions and responses. By doing so, it worked out to be a great way to improve his communication skills. It helped him get over fears that he built up in his head. And he now is a much better communicator, and he doesn't have those type of challenges going on that knock him off path and stop him from achieving his goals. So I sincerely hope that this has been helpful. This short episode, it's given you some food for thought when it comes down to trying to achieve your goals and staying committed to the task in hand. Should you want to reach out to me or gain any advice on this aspect, why not join us in our Facebook group, the Sports Psychology Hub? It's a very supportive, friendly and growing group where we all help each other. And also, you'll be able to communicate with me directly very easily there too. I really do hope to see you in there and that you have enjoyed the episode. Next week, we'll be back to an interview, a regular interview. So I hope you enjoy that too. Have a great week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams. or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.